Hey, how's it going, guys? Your friend Jim here with another video. Today I just wanted to give you a quick update on what's going on with the Montero. The previous repair was the P0171, P0174 lean DTCs, and you can see how I fixed that, and that took care of it. Those coats are gone, long-term fuel trim's back to normal, everything's great, she's running great. But as a result of that lean condition, or of that vacuum leak, I think it caused excessive carbon buildup on Bank2 catalytic converter, which caused the computer to think that it's a bad catalytic converter, and it sets the P0431. Right around the time I had that vacuum leak, I had those DTCs 171, 174. Right after that repair was made, I started getting pretty constantly the P0431 DTC, and as time went by, it took longer and longer. I would just clear it, and then it would take longer and longer for it to come back. Before, after a couple of test drives, the code would come back, and then it took a day or two to come back, and then it took a week, and then 2 weeks, and then right now it's been about 3 weeks since the code was there, even as pending. And I'm thinking the situation with the vacuum leak caused, the computer was reacting by increasing the long-term fuel trims. It caused an actual rich condition on a couple of cylinders on Bank2, and then it caused the carbon buildup in the catalytic converter. And since I couldn't find the part on Amazon or I'm sorry, on Rock Auto or some of the other parts websites, it was not available for the California approved part. I would get the code, and I have the scan tool right there in the car at all times, and I would just clear it every time. Instead of driving with the check engine light on, just clear the code and then just wait till it happens again. And then, like I said, now it's taking a long time for it to come back. So I think little by little the condition is sort of fixing itself. That carbon buildup is kind of going away now that the condition is resolved. And I'm sort of helping it out with this product. I don't know if any of you guys ever used this product. It's called CataClean. And basically what it is a solution that you put in your fuel tank, and then you drive it, and so little by little this helps break down the carbon buildup on some of the internal components. And basically you want that carbon buildup to get cleared out of the catalytic converter, because if the honeycomb is filled with carbon, then it won't have the chemical reaction that it needs to have. And so I think it's working, actually. And the way you use this product, you're supposed to, according to what they recommend, is you use it 4 times a year. So about every 3 months you use one of these bottles. And the way you use it is you wait till your tank goes down to 1/4 of a tank. You add one of these bottles excuse me, to your tank, and then you drive it for about 30 miles, and then you fill up the tank. And then you just, you run it. And then a couple months later, 3 months later, you do the same process again. And then they recommend 4 times a year or so. So this is the second bottle. I haven't done it yet. I'll try it in a couple of months, because I already did 1 bottle, and I've gone maybe through 3 tanks so far since the repair. So it seems to me that it's working. So I'll keep you guys posted on that. But yeah, P0431. If you have this condition in your vehicle, it's very likely that whatever else was going on before caused the P0431 due to a carbon buildup. Because the catalytic converter, I mean, it's just it doesn't really wear out. It just has the materials to react chemically with the gases that are going out, so that it can clean up the air. I mean, I don't want to get too much into details about stuff like that, but that's basically its main function. Alright guys, so here I'm at idle, and I'm graphing out Bank2 sensor 1, Bank2 sensor 2. And as you can see, we have the green line is Bank2 sensor 1, which is before the catalytic converter, and it's going up and down, rich, lean, as it should. And then the red line is the rear O2 sensor after the catalytic converter, and it's kind of doing its own thing. Kind of going up and down as well, but not necessarily following to the T of bank 1. So that leads me to believe that there is some chemical reaction happening with a bank 2 catalytic converter, and that's basically the way it should be. So some areas, as you can see here, what's that here, it did kind of follow it, all right, but then it kind of did its own thing. This guy's going up and down, and basically the red line is sort of kind of doing its own thing, independent of the green line. And that's basically what you want to see. You want to see this type of situation, which lets you know that the catalytic converter is functioning. Now I'm gonna compare it to bank 1 and take a look at this waveform, and let's compare it to bank 1 and see what the difference is, or if it looks the same. Again, I'm not getting a P0431. I'm not getting a code for bank 1. I was only getting a code for bank 2, but as I mentioned earlier, it hasn't returned since about 3 weeks ago. So, and right now it's not even in the memory, not even as a pending code. All right, let's go to, so right now we have bank 2 O2 sensors. Let's go to bank 1 O2 sensors. All right, so here's bank 1 O2 sensors. Sensor number 1 is the green line, sensor number 2 is the red line, and it seems to be functioning just like bank 2. The green line's going up and down, the red line is kind of doing its own thing, not necessarily following what the green line is doing, and that's basically what you want to see. And again, this is bank 1, and I'm not getting a DTC for bank 1. So that's kind of how you want the sensor signal to look like. Well, the red line's staying high for a little bit longer than I would. Oh, we never. Okay, now it went down. So yeah. So even if it's on if the rear O2 sensor is on the rich side or the lean side, as long as it's not, that doesn't really matter too much. As long as it's not following what the green line is doing. As long as it's not following what the bank 1 is doing, then you know there is some sort of chemical reaction happening within the catalytic converter. So yeah, so it just kind of does its own thing. It goes up and down, up and down. So all right, let's go back in the garage and we'll talk a little bit more about the function and some other possibilities. Alright guys, so once again, as I was mentioning before, the leak was around this area right here. So all the extra air that was going into the engine was mainly affecting this cylinder, which is cylinder number 1 on bank 1 on this side. And then obviously part of it went to the next cylinder, which is going to bank 2. So this is going to bank 1, this is going to bank 2. You can see the curve right here. This is going to bank 1, bank 2, bank 1, bank 2. So these cylinders towards the rear, especially this one and this one, the computer was adjusting 12.5% long-term fuel trims, and these two guys were probably pretty rich because they weren't getting a lot of oxygen. The vacuum leak was mostly affecting this cylinder, not so much this cylinder, but it was enough for the computer to think that the whole bank was lean. So my theory is that because a couple of cylinders were excessively rich, due to the computer adjusting the long-term fuel trim to 12.5%, that caused the carbon buildup in the catalytic converter. So that's sort of my theory there. Now, here's another document. This document, so kind of like what we were looking at right now with the waveforms. This is when everything's functioning normally. You have the O2 sensor number 1 is cycling as a regular O2 sensor should. And then you have chemical reaction in the catalytic converter, and then O2 sensor number 2 is kind of doing its own thing, kind of going up, down, and then if you go wide open throttle, it'll just kind of do its own thing as well. When you have a bad catalytic converter and the computer sets the P0421 for bank 1, P0431 for bank 2, then you have this type of waveform. You have both O2 sensors, the O2 sensor number 1 cycling as a regular O2 sensor, and since there's no chemical reaction in the catalytic converter, then the rear O2 sensor is going to be basically doing the same thing this sensor is doing. So that's indicating a bad catalytic converter or a catalytic converter that's basically has a lot of carbon buildup. The other way the catalytic converter can fail, and there's no point of no return, is if it overheats. If it's running excessively rich to the point where the carbon buildup and everything turns cherry red, then it just overheats and it just deteriorates the material inside, and then there's no way of that catalytic converter coming back to life. Like a carbon buildup situation, you can add the product that we talked about, this thing here, and then that might get some of that buildup out of there and bring the catalytic converter to functioning again. That's sort of what I'm hoping for. I mean, obviously, if it continues and this theory does not hold true, then obviously I'll have to replace the catalytic converter. But I'm pretty hopeful because it's been, like I said, it's been about 3 weeks. Whereas before, when I first repaired it, I mean, every other day that code would come back. So now in this other example here is what I initially thought. And I talked about this during that short video that I put up a few months ago. When you have a leak, an exhaust system leak, whether it's the flange gasket or a bad weld or something like that, or a pinhole leak, you have this type of pattern where the O2 sensor number 1 is kind of doing its own thing, like a regular O2 sensor, and then the rear O2 sensor is just very sporadic, just kind of going everywhere, no rhyme or reason. And that's an indication of an exhaust system leak. But I don't think that's what's happening here. I mean, we may have, excuse me, we may have an exhaust system leak somewhere, but it's not affecting this. It's not. That's not what's causing the P0431. So, anyway. Alright guys, so that's it for this video. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you've used this product before, or if you have any experience with this. But if my theory holds true, then we might be onto something. I mean, that obviously, if you get a factory catalytic converter set up, you're talking about over $1,000. If it's aftermarket, it's a little bit cheaper, but then again, it's got to be compatible with California emissions if you're in California. If it's the federal emissions one, then that one was available, but it's still about $600. So, you know, if you run into a situation like this where something is causing your system to run rich, and then after you fix it, now you have a P0431 or P0421, then it could just be carbon buildup in the catalytic converter. So look into that possibility. So yeah, let me know your thoughts. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel, and we'll see you on the next one.